Hi friends, welcome to another video. Grab yourself something to drink, a cup of tea or coffee, get cozy while we reminisce about the last year, because I'm going to tell you about my favorite books that I read in 2022. So the year 2022 was an okay year of reading, I would say, for me personally. I read a lot of really random books and a lot of them were mediocre. It wasn't really easy to find a lot of favorite books, which is why it's only a top 5 and not a top 10 or anything like that. But I also only had a few books that I didn't enjoy at all. So I would say it was okay. For the next year, I definitely want to read more books that I really enjoy and that are more up my alley. So yeah, the next year is definitely going to be about figuring out which kind of books I like and what I want to read more of. But the books I'm going to talk about in this video are the books that I really enjoyed and that stood out to me out of all the books that I read. In total, I read 50 books last year, and I have to say quite a lot of them were books that I read in the last few weeks of the year, because the 3 months before that I was at uni and it was really stressful, so I didn't get a lot of reading done. I don't think it's necessarily important how many books you read, it's just I really like numbers, and I also like comparing my own reading stats to the years before, not to the book stats of other people, but just to myself. Can I read more books? And reading more books that I enjoy is definitely a priority rather than reading more books in general. So the books that I'm going to talk about today are books that I would personally recommend to my friends and also, of course, to you. So let's get started with my short little list. So the first book that I'm going to talk about today is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. And it's also a really pretty book, in my opinion. I really like the cover, and I also have this really pretty edition, which I'm really proud of, and I hope that I will be able to find the second and the other books of the series in the same beautiful edition. So this book is about Bryce. So Bryce lives in a really big city in an urban fantasy world. I think it's the capital of the world, or at least the country that it's set in. It's a really long book, so it's kind of confusing to remember all of the details, but I'm going to read the second book soon, so I might have to inform myself again, or at least read a summary of what has happened in this book, because I think I forgot a lot of it, to be honest. But what I do remember is that Bryce works for a magician. She sells kind of half legal objects, and that's her job. She also likes to party, especially with her best friend Danica. But then her best friend Danica is murdered in a really brutal and tragic way. And Bryce is going to try to find the murderer of Danica, and a lot of trouble and chaos ensues. So it's not all that easy to find out who did it. The reason why I enjoyed this book so much is definitely the world it was set in. It's an urban fantasy world, which I personally really enjoy. I love urban fantasy books. So yeah, a lot of people find it really confusing because there are a lot of different species. For example, Bryce herself, she's half human, half fave, but I really enjoy it. I like all of the different beings and all of the different characters you get to know throughout the whole book. Bryce is a badass main character. I think she's really cool. And what I also really enjoyed about this book is that it has angels in it. And I just, for some reason, am a sucker for fantasy books with angels in them. I don't know why. It's just the way it is. I also had a bit of a fantasy reading slump before beginning this book. I didn't really find the right fantasy books for me. So this book really pulled me out of my reading slump. It made me want to get into fantasy again, made me want to pick up more fantasy books, and that's what I did in the last year. And I'm so excited to be starting the second book soon. The second book that I really enjoyed last year was another book that I have with me. It's Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. This is the German edition, if you were wondering why the title looks different. So Colleen Hoover is one of my favorite authors in the romance genre, and that's why I was already really excited about the book before it even came out. Reminders of Him is a book about Kenna, who comes back to the place she has lived in before after 5 years of being away. After she has lost her first big love, she comes back in search of her 4-year-old daughter, who now lives with the parents of her former partner. When she comes back, she meets Ledger, the first guy she feels attracted to after the death of her former partner. But then it turns out that Ledger is someone that she shouldn't actually be attracted to, and that's kind of what it is about. I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, it's sort of a forbidden romance. I have to say it's not my all-time favorite Colleen Hoover romance, but that doesn't really say much because I enjoy most of her books, and this book was also one that I really enjoyed. I read it in one sitting, so I think that says it all. And that's why it would be a book that I recommend to all of you. So if that would be something that sounds like a book you would enjoy, go ahead and pick it up. The next book I'm going to talk about is not just a book, it's actually a series of books, and I don't have them with me because I read these on Kindle or I listened to them as audiobooks. The series that I'm talking about is the Off-Campus series by Elle, and the first book of that is The Deal. So I'm going to tell you about this book because it's the perfect start to this series. The Off-Campus series is a sports romance series that revolves around ice hockey players. I don't actually know anything about ice hockey because I think that's more of an American sport. In Europe it's not as popular, but I don't think you need to be reading those books anyway. All of the books in the series are very fun, very fast-paced and interesting. They are written with a great sense of humor and they aren't too deep. This is also why the books are very quick reads, and I think I finished the whole series over the course of a month, maybe, so I really enjoyed it. They were also exactly what I needed at that time. It was really stressful. I was at uni and finishing many projects, so I didn't have to think about what I was reading apart from reading it. And I think it's actually one of the few series that I would reread just as a comfort book that I know will make me feel good about myself and feel good about what I'm reading. So the book The Deal tells the story of Hannah Wells, who has a crush but doesn't really have the courage to talk to him. And there Garrett comes into play. He is an ice hockey player and he needs someone to help him with his studies because he's actually failing one of his classes, I believe. And Hannah is the one who can help him with it. But she's really reluctant and doesn't want to do it. But then he offers to help her with her crush and make her crush jealous and give her tips to make him like her. So he's trying to boost her popularity by pretending to be her date. And this fake dating story might become a little more serious than it was intended to be. And fake dating stories also bring us to our next book. The next book is Fake Out by Ian Finley. I think this book was a really fresh take on fake dating stories. It's very sweet and wholesome. Fake Out tells the story of Maddox and Damon. Maddox is a guy who doesn't really like to go home to his hometown because he has told everyone that he is gay. And the reason why he told this whole town that he's gay is actually that he didn't want to break his high school sweetheart's heart when he broke up with her. So he just told her that he's gay, and that's why they couldn't be together. I know, very smart decision. And it makes him sound like a total jerk. But then he actually meets his high school sweetheart and she invites him to her wedding. And when they are meeting, he's drunk, so he says yes. And he also adds that he's going to bring his non-existent boyfriend. So now he has to find a boyfriend he can bring home for the weekend. And who's better to bring home than his best friend's brother? Damon is the brother of his best friend. And when he gets asked to help a straight guy pretending to be gay, he's like, no, I don't want to do this. But then Maddox has an opportunity for him to meet a sports player that he, as a sport agent, needs to build his career. And that's why he agrees to come home with him and to pretend to be his boyfriend for the weekend. I read quite a lot of fake dating romances in the last year, and this was one of the ones that I really enjoyed. The last book that was one of my favorites last year was Radio Silence by Elle Oseman. This is a YA novel, and it follows the main character Frances. I really enjoy a good coming of age and YA contemporary story, even though it's not the age demographic that I'm in anymore. I still enjoy reading them. And something that I personally can always relate to in YA books or coming of age books is, firstly, if the academic high achiever girl has to figure out what to do with her life and what success actually means if it isn't measured in grades. And with that often also comes the teen angst, that is, what the heck am I supposed to do with my life? And that is something I can relate to very well. So this book entailed all of this and even more. It also revolves around nerd culture, podcasts, and diversity. And this is why it was also one of my favorite books of the year. Elle Oseman is a really interesting author, and I look forward to reading more of her books this year. So these were the books that I found memorable this year and that I would recommend to all of you. Let me know in the comments if you have already read any of these and if you enjoyed them or not. And if you agree with my opinion on these books.